So welcome to the CEA Power Hour. I'm Joanna Oliver and I'm the Director of Global Programmes for the Construction and Equipment Association for Global Reed Small Village in Yorkshire at the moment because, like most of you, I've certainly not been anywhere for over a year. Although I did manage a trip to the hairdressers this morning, which was a great relief for all concerned. Quick run through the rules of the day. Webinar, as always, is held in accordance with the CEA corporate compliance rules, and you can find those on our website. The webinar will be recorded and along with the slides from today's presenter will be available on our website once we've processed the recording. If you don't want to be recorded, please leave now because we're about to start recording. Please stay on mute unless you are called to ask a question. It's nothing worse than hearing somebody eating their lunch over the speaker. If you do want to ask a question, please use the chat facility in the Zoom control box. And most of the questions we will take just as written questions. I think, having seen today's presentation, there's going to be lots of thought for discussion, so please do get your questions ready, and we've got plenty of time today because we just have James, who's the expert, so don't be shy, please ask questions, and don't go home at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock thinking I wish I'd asked X. Please turn off your video. Not all of us are fortunate enough to have super fast broadband, so to help us with bandwidth, please turn it off. If you don't, we'll turn it off for you. And we are doing our best, as I'm sure you are. So if there's any technical difficulties, we will try and get going again as soon as possible, but bear with us. So today's menu. Those of you who were with us at the November Power Hour will remember excellent presentation from Holly Tang from Avocet Customs Clearance. And today's speaker is a colleague of Holly's from Harman Customs and is going to be looking at duties and customs from a slightly different angle. And most importantly, he's going to help companies try and look at tariff clarifications and save you money. He's going to tell you exactly how much money he's saved other companies during his presentation. James is the owner of Harman Customs and has been since 2018, and he's a highly regarded customs consultant and one of the EU's foremost expert in autonomous duty suspensions. James has worked with lots of big and small companies, some of them in our sector and in the materials handling sector. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to James. He's going to talk to us for about 20 minutes and then, as I say, there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. Over to you, James.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction, Joanna. Yep, my name is James O'Neill, and I'm the owner of Harman Customs and an expert in tariff classification and duty recovery. So I've got a fairly short slideshow to discuss what's changed recently, how to mitigate customs duty, and just about tariff classification in general, and how that kind of works. So let me just start the scatter. Brilliant. So yeah, I founded Harman Customs 3 years ago with to continue the focus on minimising customs duty on behalf of EU and UK importers, and my focus is on classification and classification compliance. So that means applying the correct commodity code for traded goods. So in this brief webinar, I just want to explain how the classification of the goods affects customs duty that's paid, why correct classification is crucial to accurately declaring your goods to the customs authorities, and how in certain circumstances duty can be mitigated. So when I talk about customs duty mitigation, first of all, we've got to understand what customs duty is, and I'm sure most of you understand what that is. It's a charge that is made by the customs authorities for certain goods from certain third countries. It's usually, but not always, charged as an ad valorem percentage of the customs value. So what's changed? Well, obviously Brexit's happened. So the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the TCA, that was signed between the UK and the EU, that provides a zero rate of duty relief for most goods that cross the EU-UK border, where those goods are of either UK or EU origin, and where the originating status has been maintained for those goods. So Brexit means that the EU has now become a third country to the UK for customs purposes and vice versa. So that means that the duty may be applicable, and that and where it is applied, then it would be the third country duty rate that is applied to the import. So that would apply the highest rate of duty where the goods do not meet the rules of origin for preference under the TCA agreement. The other change is, of course, that customs entries are required for goods crossing into the UK and out of the UK, and obviously into the EU member states as well. So customs declarations all round. The other thing is that the UK now has its own UK global tariff, as it's called, and so the UK government is able to set its own tariff rates in line with WCO rules, and it has reduced some duty rates, removed some of the tariff headings, and it will look later on in the year to remove some of the duty suspensions and quotas that are currently in the tariff and form part of the UK tariff. So the bottom line, I guess, is that you can't assume that the codes you've used prior to Brexit or that you currently use are going to be the correct ones moving forward. So if you're a business that makes import declarations to an EU member state, for example, if you sell to an EU customer under DDP terms, then you'll need to continue classifying your goods using the EU's combined nomenclature, which I'll explain in a bit more detail. So in order to classify goods to customs, we must bear in mind three things that ultimately determine the duty that's paid. So those three things being classification, origin, and value. And how you build up the customs value and evidence origin are both crucial elements in making an accurate customs declaration. But for this talk, the focus is on the tariff classification element, as in where and how goods are classified. So all possible classifications of traded goods are documented in country-specific databases known as tariffs. Tariffs are used to determine both the taxes, anti-dumping, normal duties, control measures such as export licensing that are applicable to the goods in question. So, negligence through misclassification is subject to penalties from customs authorities like HMRC. And suffice to say that classification compliance is an essential aspect of trade compliance, and for companies trading with the EU, it is essential that UK businesses evaluate the codes that are assigned on imported and exported products. So obviously I'd like to discuss in a bit more detail the classification systems in place in both the UK and the EU. So the harmonised system is what both the UK and EU's nomenclatures are based on. So the HS is maintained by the World Customs Organization and is currently used to classify over 98% of internationally traded goods. So the HS code is comprised of 6-digit numbers. So the first two digits of the code correspond to the chapter of the tariff that the goods belong to. Sorry, let me just fast forward a bit. So then the third and fourth digits to the actual heading, and the 5th and 6th digits to the chapter subheading. So as the HS is used by all members of the WCO, all 6-digit codes should be the same among WCO members, so which obviously include the UK and the EU. So both their coding systems, the first 6 digits are the same, which obviously is useful. So in addition to the HS, the UK and the EU classification systems are based on the EU's combined nomenclature known as the CN. So the CN has 2 major updates each year, in the January and the July, and that's where they add in or delete commodity codes that relate to duty suspensions and quotas. So it's, things do change. So if you are a business that uses suspensions which reduce the duty rate to 0 for very specific items, it's important to monitor those codes because they can and are deleted or renewed or amended in terms of the description. So it's basically important to keep track of the codes that are in the nomenclature. So the European system is basically at the 10-digit level is known as a TARIC, or the integrated tariff, and that provides the duty rates and measures that are attached to all imported goods. So as you can see, the number is comprised of 10 digits, starting at the chapter, then the heading at 4-digit level, subheading level at 6 digits, CN subheading at 8, and then finally the 9th and 10th being the TARIC level to provide that 10-digit code. And it's only that at the 10 digits that you have the actual measures and duty rates attached, and then obviously that then depends on the country of origin that the goods are coming from, then determines the rate of duty that is applied. So the UK has its own tariff now, so that the last 2 digits may be different to the EU's coding system. In practice, we found that actually the UK system is almost exactly the same, certainly from the codes that are there. So the differences really relate to the duty rates rather than the coding system itself. And we found that even where the EU updates and deletes a code, the UK coding system follows suit. So although officially it is it's an independent tariff in its own right, it very much follows the EU's coding system at the moment. That may change, but for now, most codes will be the same in both tariffs, although there are, of course, some that have already been removed, and so there is already divergence between the 2 coding systems. So again, if you're trading goods across the EU border, then it's very important that you do check the codes locally to the market that you're importing into, if you're making those customs declarations to, say France or Germany or wherever they might be imported to. So just to give you a brief bit on how the tariff that sits above it is divided. You've got different sections. So as you can see there, you've got section 1 for live animals, animal products, section 2 vegetable products, and so on. So that's the starting point of both the UK and EU tariffs. And so it's basically goes from the section through to the chapter subheading, all the way through to the TARIC and the 10-digit code. So how do we use the coding system to classify the goods? Well, we use what's called the general interpretive rules. So this is 6 rules that can be applied to classify anything that may need classifying, starting at rule 1 and then working through down the list to rule 6. So if you can't use rule 1, or if you can use rule 1, I should say, then you don't need to refer to the following rules, you just stop at GIR1. The majority, a vast majority of goods can be classified in relation to GIR 1 and 6. 6 being basically that the same rule, GIR 1 applies to the subheading level. But if I go through each rule just to give you a bit more of a kind of feel for them, starting with rule 1. So say this is the most commonly used rule, and it basically states that the terms of the heading and the tariff notes have legal force. So although there are other notes, you may have come across CNENs or HSEN notes, those don't have any legal force. However, they are also very useful and persuasive, especially in the court of law, if you were ever to have to take a claim to court where you were disputing the tariff code. They would take into consideration the HSEN notes and CNENs. But for legal surety, the actual the legal part is the terms of the heading and the tariff notes themselves, as in the section notes in the tariff. They're the only thing that have legal force. So if you can classify using those, then that's what you use. For example, if we take games console and run through how you might classify it using GIR1. So obviously a games console, you could think, right, well, it's really a computer. It's got a lot of similarities to a computer. So possibly it's chapter 8471, which classifies a computer and computer equipment, although the tariff still refers to computers as automatic data processing machines, but that's just the tariff for you. It's always quite out of date. So that could be one option. Then the other option, could it be classified as a game in chapter 95? So it's how do we choose? So this one is actually quite easy because the notes in section 16, which includes chapter 84, where computers are classified, explicitly states that this section does not cover articles of chapter 90 where games are classified. And if you look at the heading for in chapter 90, 9504, you'll see that there's a heading specifically for video games, consoles, and machines under that heading, which I'll come on to. I'll show you in more detail later. Okay, so going on to the second rule. This is where, so if you can't use GIR1, you'd have to move to rule 2. This isn't very often used because this is for the classification of incomplete, unfinished, disassembled or unassembled goods. So those with the essential character of complete or finished goods are classified as being complete. So this rule doesn't apply if either the heading or the tariff notes exclude the product in question. So one example of where GIR2 would be used would be bicycles, where they are imported in incomplete or unassembled form. So some traders actually split complete bikes into halves because the ADD was so high, I mean, up to kind of 48%, that they thought they could get around that by importing the bike in two halves, and therefore, saying that, well, as an incomplete bike, lower duty rates applied. But of course, GIR2 states that, basically, even if it's in an unassembled form, if it has the essential character of the finished good, then that's where it should be classified. So that kind of put paid to that idea. But that is an example of where that rule might apply. So moving on to rule 3, this is where this is used where goods are classified or could be classified under 2 or more headings, so that the more specific heading must be chosen. So this is in the case of mixtures, composite goods, or goods put up in sets for retail sale, the essential character will be used to determine where the goods should be classified. So in chemicals where you might have 3 or 4 different active ingredients, it might be that you look at which has gives the chemical its essential characters in what does the chemical do, what's its function, or it might be that it's one particular material has the biggest percentage by weight, so that can be used. But it's basically a rule where there are competing parts to the item itself, and you have to look at what gives its essential character. Where essential character cannot be determined, then Rule 3 also stipulates that goods are classified under the heading which occurs last in numerical order, just as a kind of fail-safe. So usually that's as far as we get with the rules. Rule 1 applies, then 2 is generally not relevant, and then it's 3 that gets used the most after Rule 1, I'd say, in order to correctly classify goods. Rule 4 is a bit of a kind of odd one, really, and it's usually where it's a completely new item, and just the tariff is just completely not able to classify it. And in those instances, the rule basically says, what is it most akin to? So it's a last resort, really, that it is not often used, and I really don't think many people will come across it. So Rule 5, this one's specifically for packaging, which is something that lots of importers overlook when they're bringing goods into the country. So obviously where you have a packing of a good that stays with the item, so for example, like a violin case that's housing a violin, then it gets classified as the violin. So it doesn't require any separate classification. And where you have packaging that is not reused, again, it basically forms part of the goods that are being imported and doesn't require separate classification. So, however, where you've got a pallet, or you've got reusable packing materials, then they do have to be classified separately. So they have to be coded separately, and they have to you have to account for the value of those packing materials within the customs value, and that is something that customs usually look to inquire about if they're ever making a classification audit on you. They'll ask about packaging, so it's something that sometimes does get overlooked. And then, as I mentioned before, Rule 6 basically says that that the terms of the tariff subheading have legal force, similar to the GIR one. So basically, most goods where you see a ruling issued by customs, the classification justification will usually refer to classified in accordance to rules 1 and 6, because obviously to classify the goods, you're assigning a 10-digit code, so it needs to not only account for the legal text at the heading level, but also the subheading level. So so that's what that rule's there to state. So where do we actually apply these rules, and where do we actually classify the goods? So the two databases, online databases, that I'd like to just make you aware of if you're not already, and many of you I know will be aware of these and use them regularly, are TARIC, which is what you can see on screen now, and then the UK tariff, which I'll show you a screenshot of in a second. But both basically allow you to browse goods codes, so as in you could input either a 2 or 4, 6, 8 or 10 digits within the goods code box, and then if you hit retrieve measures, it will bring up all of the measures that relate to that area of the tariff, or indeed if you've input the full number, the measures and duty rates attached at the 10-digit level. You can also browse or search by a particular search term, and you can bring stuff up there. So I just thought it'd be useful just to run through how you actually classify something in relation to the indents. So what's really important is that you don't use the indents incorrectly. So looking at our PlayStation game console and how you'd look at classifying that, we'd obviously look at the chapter heading and see that that was relevant in that it classified games. And then we'd look at the individual headings at the 4-digit level. So it starts there 9503 for tricycles and scooters, so we can discount that one. And then we get to 9504 for video games, consoles and machines. So that sounds relevant, but that only gives us the first 4 digits. So then we need to go down looking at the indent. So the first indent there is for 950420, articles and accessories for billiards, which is not applicable. So then we look at other games operated by coins and banknotes. That's not applicable either. That doesn't sound relevant. So what we do now is go to the next one indent. You ignore the 2 indent level descriptions that fall underneath 950430. So you can ignore them completely, or you have to ignore them, because if you've discounted the 1 indent level, then that would then mean all the 2 indent or 3 indent, 4 indent level descriptions under it would also be irrelevant. So the next 1 indent level is for the playing cards. Again, discount. The next one there, as you can see, video games, consoles and machines. So that would be where you classify your goods. Now, as you can see, that code 950450 is in blue, and what that's tell you that actually, although it's an HS code, as in 6 digits, it is, if you clicked on that, going to take you straight through to a TARIC code, as in a 10-digit code. So all the nomenclature does is add zeros, because there's no further subheading division. So it doesn't split it down into different types of video games. It basically just says all video games, consoles are classified under that one heading. Obviously, if we were to look further up at games operated by coins, it's then split down into games with a screen, other games and parts. So and in the tariff you'll find sometimes in the for example, like the fruit and drinks, fruit drinks, you may have different things like sugar content, or different types of ingredients that mean that you have maybe up to 20 different indent levels. So it can get quite complicated, but it's very important to discount anything. If you discount something at 1 indent, you always move on to the next 1 indent level, and so on. Looking at the UK tariff now, which is obviously gives you the same information, but is formatted differently, more in line with the UK government website. Again, you can do the same thing. So you've got a search box there, and it pulls everything out by heading all the way through to 10 digits. It also has some other useful databases. So if you click on the tools tab, you will get things, some further information on things like quotas, certificates, additional codes and chemicals, where you can search by CAS number, etc. So that there are some other useful databases that sit in and around the main tariff tool. The other thing it does include is you can search on rulings issued. So I'm going to give you a bit more information about what rulings, binding rulings are, and how they're useful now. Yeah, that's just to show you where everything is. Yeah, the actual overview gives you an overview of what each commodity code is, and then it has a separate import and export tab to give you information on the measures that are attached to each one. and the footnotes obviously show the law that it relates to. So the other useful database when looking at classifying goods is the EBTI database, which is what's on screen now, that's available on the Europa database, European Commission database. So using this, you can actually search by description. So you might be able to put in, PlayStation or games console, and it would bring up, it would bring up all relevant rulings that have been issued to anyone who had made an application. So it doesn't tell you who the holder is. It just shows you the product, gives you the classification justification, and obviously the commodity code that's been assigned. So even if you're importing the same thing, it's not technically legally binding on you as you're not the holder, but it would certainly give you a very good indication as to where to classify your goods. So it's just a very useful database. The UK has its own database for rulings. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of information about each one. So EU businesses, may choose to apply for BTIs. They are written tariff classifications of particular commodity codes. So, they, unless they're cancelled or unless there's been a change to where goods are being classified by the European Commission, and they do sometimes change that there's a nomenclature committee that sits regularly to discuss where products should be classified. Unless there has been any change, then a BTI that's been issued will stay in legal force for a 3-year period. It was 5, but it has been reduced to 3. So if you've got any older BTIs and you thought they might still be in force, they may not be now, so you'll need to check that. They're the only thing that provide legal surety of coding. So as I say, we've got the BTIs for imports into Europe, and then the UK now has its own system, which is called Advanced Tariff Rulings, ATARs. But they both do the same job in providing the importer legal surety of coding. And that's quite important because if you ever have had the misfortune of suffering a classification audit where HMRC come in and check the codes that you use, they are well within their rights to decide where they believe the goods should be classified. And they would usually do that in conjunction with the tariff classification team down in Southend. But if you don't have any BTIs in place, or now ATAR rulings, then they could say, well, we disagree with where you've classified your goods, and actually the rate of duty that's applicable to the code that we think is correct is higher, and they can assess you for duty going back 3 years. So I always recommend to importers to look at getting rulings in place, and that's something I can certainly assist you with in future if anyone needs any help with those. One thing to mention is that BTIs, Binding Tariff Information Rulings, are legally binding in all 27 EU member states and in Northern Ireland, whereas obviously ATARs are only binding for imports into the UK and are not binding outside of the UK. Let me just have a look. So yeah, that's kind of it really. I mean, my business has helped classify goods. My background, I've been doing this over 15 years in terms of classifying goods for importers for kind of the last 15 years with a view to reducing the amount of duty paid. Typically speaking, if someone has been lazy at classifying something and just hit kind of other, you will always end up paying the most amount of duty. You'll suffer the highest duty rate in that particular area of the tariff. Usually the last other code will also have the highest duty rate attached to it. So, spending time making sure that goods are classified correctly can minimise your customs duty that's applicable. And then obviously if you back it up with a binding ruling, then you have that legal surety of coding in place. The other thing is, of course, that you may be able to change the rate of duty that's applied. So you have many hundreds of different duty suspensions within both the UK and EU tariffs, and suspensions typically bring the duty rate down to 0. So it might be that if you have a manufacturing operation based in the UK or indeed in other EU member states and import from third countries like China, then there is the argument to say, well, why should I have to pay import duty on this part coming into the EU or the UK that I can't source locally? If it might be that you have a particular part that just no one makes anymore in the UK or the EU, and in that scenario, you have a justification for making an application to either the UK or the EU to apply for a duty suspension, which then, if granted, brings the duty rate down to 0. And obviously that can be of a great benefit going forward. And the idea is to have a code that's very specific to the item that you import, and that then allows you to mitigate some of the duty that you might otherwise have paid. So that's it really. Open to questions.
Thanks, James. It's one of the many ongoing laws of unexpected consequences of Brexit. I think how much more complicated something that was an incredibly complicated subject was already. What is the good news coming out of your presentation is that it is possible to, by a bit of digging and a bit of research, reclassify some of your products and get some duty suspension. And I know that's something that you're ready to help people with. One of my favourite unintended consequences of Brexit that I heard on the farming programme this week was that people that are exporting cheddar cheese to France now have to have it inspected by a vet before it's allowed to pass through customs. Now, I know you spend 7 years at veterinary college studying, but I'm pretty sure there isn't a module on the health of cheese. So frankly, nothing would surprise me. Anyway, if you want to unshare your presentation and then I can share my screen.
Sure.
Okay, so I don't need to share it, do I? I just need to be on it. So who would like to ask a question? I can't see any questions in the chat box. So if anybody wants to shout out, Mark, you've appeared.
Yeah, it may not be anything that you can answer, James, but thank you very much for going through that. I'll say first, I actually represent Communautaire UK, and it's our parent company in France that are classifying the goods coming in the main. So, but it's useful to have an understanding of how they're classified. So thank you very much for that. I've got the questions to say that you may not be able to answer, and if you can't, I fully understand. But something that we're finding we're being asked for more and more since Brexit is by our dealers that are exporting used machines into the EU, bearing in mind our manufacturing is in the EU, and then coming into the UK, i.e. out of the EU and back to the EU. But being asked for some sort of a document when those machines are exported secondhand to the EU, showing that they have preferential origin. Is that anything you can comment on?
Yes. So this is what's called originating status. So you might have a used forklift truck that is very clearly being manufactured in the UK. However, if that is in free circulation, it will lose its originating status. So when it crosses into the EU, it will be treated as any third country import would be, and the full rate would be applied. So really, I doubt that you would be able to obtain UK originating status for those goods, because for duty purposes, I think the full rate of duty would apply. So it's similar to, if you've had something that, let's say you had a brand new forklift truck that was made in the UK, and for whatever reason it was exported out of the country, then was re-imported back in, and then you were looking to sell that brand new forklift truck back out into Europe. Again, if you'd brought those, if they'd remained under customs control, then that would be fine. But if they had at any point been brought into free circulation and declared, then they lose the UK originating status, and therefore when the goods cross over into Europe, the full duty rate would apply.
I'm not sure if I perhaps asked my question quite clearly, but I mean, I think what these customers are saying is the originating status is EU, i.e. France is where they're built, and they come into the UK and are used for 1, 2, 3, 5 years or whatever, and are then going back to the EU as used machines. So I think what they're asking us is to essentially say that they are originating in the EU.
Okay. Well, yeah, whether they again, it's the same problem. I appreciate different country, but it's going to be the same issue, because what's happened is the goods will have been exported to the UK. We've left the UK, therefore, sorry, we've left the EU. So therefore, goods that are now in the UK in free circulation will require, as far as the UK, as far as the EU is concerned, goods coming into it now from the UK will be treated as a third country import, because the UK is a third country to the EU. So although the goods originally came from, say, France, were manufactured in France, they may, or they will have moved to the UK as the UK was part of the EU's customs union. There would have been no export to the UK. They would have just moved, it would have been a union transit movement of goods from France to the UK. But at the moment that we left, wherever those goods were, and now if they're looking to go back to the EU, it will just be treated as a third country import. So I think that it's going to be a challenge for those companies to bring those goods back into Europe without suffering customs duty charges.
Okay, no, very much appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you very much.
Okay. So I note Dale Fletcher's comment, with so many businesses struggling to classify correctly, is this an area that will be automated going forward? Well, the reality is classification is already being automated to a large extent. So, there's lots of AI tools out there that some better than others that will assist with classifying items based on an item description. But again, with experience, the information that is being crunched isn't necessarily enough to classify goods. So it's always going to be an area that I think will require a human to cast its eye over, because they're going to be variables that are going to be missed by kind of AI and machine learning. But yes, it is certainly something that can help undertake the bulk of your work. But the way I would typically work is look at the goods by value and look at where your duty liability is highest, as in what items do you pay the most amount of duty on, and where is your biggest risk by value for goods where you currently classify to a low or zero code. So managing those two ends really, to make sure that if you can get the classification right for those items where the value is high and the duty is currently at zero, if suddenly customs came in and classified it to a 10% heading, you'd have a big liability. So we look at those, and then we'd also look at where you currently pay a lot of duty on, with a view to seeing if there's any codes that, or if there's any correct code that it could be reclassified to. But and that is something that you would struggle to automate, but certainly automation is something that happens.
So question from Sarah.
Yep, and let me just read it. Product has a code in the TARIC, but the product ends up being used as part of a larger machine. Can it be classified under the final machine code as a central part of it when the duty rate is 0 or nil? So this depends on the area of the tariff. Some parts are very clearly classified as parts of a machine. Some parts actually get classified under the actual TARIC code of the machine, and some have its own specific parts heading, and then some parts just get classified perhaps by just what they're made of. So you might have, say, if it's a very simple part like a washer or a screw or a nut, then it will be classified as such. But for example, for something more sophisticated like a suspension part for a car, then it will be classified under a parts heading for cars. So it's car parts are classified in Chapter 8708 for all cars that are in Chapter 8703. So it really depends on the item itself, but certainly some parts are classified with the machines they're part of. Sometimes it does get that there are definitely some opportunities around trying to argue that what might look like a consumable part, so where you might have, say, a particular plastic component of a laboratory equipment. You might have a kind of a plastic insert that's a kind of a consumed item, and lots of people classify it as a plastic part in Chapter, say, 39, heading 3926, and actually there is some case law and planning that would classify it as part of the as an integral part of the machine, that then does have a lower duty rate. So it really depends on the part. So looking at next question, can you expand a little bit more on the possibilities for duty suspension on parts that can't be produced in the EU, UK, i.e. China? So yeah, so I guess the justification for a duty suspension is mainly, is it produced in the local market, i.e. is it produced in the UK? Prior to Brexit, the UK would have been part of the EU's suspension regime. Going forward, the UK will have its own suspension regime, which is still currently work in progress. I believe we have someone on the call actually that is part of the policy team that's putting the UK suspension team together, regime together. But the justification will broadly be the same. If you're importing something from China or outside of the UK, importing into the UK to make something here of added value, and you can't source that component or raw material or semi-finished component either at all, or you can't source it in sufficient quantities, then you have the justification for making an application to have that duty zeroed. So it's an application that will go to DIT in the UK. It goes off if you want to make an application in another EU member state, then it would go off initially to a particular department within each of the member state customs authorities. And then what happens is that in the EU, they sit as the Economic Tariff Questions Group. They sit down 3 times, twice a year to discuss all new applications, check where the goods should be classified, see if there's been any objections to the applications that have been made. And ultimately, if they agree that the application is justified, then they will issue a new 10-digit commodity code into the tariff. So you'll have a brand new 10-digit commodity code with a very specific description that will obviously meet the terms of your imported part, raw material or component, and then you can claim the zero rate. So yeah, that's hopefully that gives you a little bit more information, but obviously feel free to message me afterwards, or I'm happy to give further information on that.
There's a question from Liz Law, which I think followed on from Sarah's question, saying, is this not dependent on whether the parts were imported with the whole goods or not?
It can be, is the answer, but not necessarily. So if you can have parts of a greater machine or item that get imported either under the finished code, if it still has the essential character of the finished product, or it can. It really depends on the area of the tariff is the bottom line, because some items will have their own specific parts heading, and that's where they will be classified if they met the terms of that particular heading, or they might be so you could have, say, a washer and a bolt and the nut might be imported within the same container as the finished part, but it would still be classified as a washer or a screw or nut or whatever, because of what it is. It's not far enough along to be considered a part of a particular machine. So hopefully that answers that one. Just note further up, there was a question on a particular commodity code for a chemical with the additional 4-digit codes 2501, which resulted in the levy of 6%. So this code is apparently for nucleic acids. Okay, so the extra 4 digits just confirms the 6% duty. So that code is another code for nucleic acids, and what that and a 6% duty rate is applicable. The additional code is to apply that 6% rate, and in instances where there are, because it's another code, it basically is a catch-all heading for a many good number of different chemicals. So some of the chemicals imported correctly under that commodity code will be duty-free because they appear in what's called the INN list, the Annex 3 list for pharmaceutical goods. So where that's the case, you would apply 2500, which would pick up the 0 rate. So presuming your goods were not appearing in the INN list, then you would be correct to apply the 2501 code and apply the 6% rate. So that it might be that you've just never seen it before, but that's what there is. You also have now, because of COVID, there's also legislation that says if you're supplying goods to a state organisation or a charity, there are certain commodity codes that also have an additional code 2600 or 2601, again for this exact same purpose, where you'll have some goods that meet the criteria for importation duty-free. You apply the additional code to pick that 0 rate up. Otherwise, you put in the 2601 code and duty will be applied.
Okay. Any more questions?
I've just seen another one there. We currently import some finished goods from China and then export them to the EU. They carry a tariff. As a result, duties are being paid on import and export. Is there a way to mitigate this? Yes, you'd need a customs warehouse. To keep the goods under customs control on import into the UK. So where you bring the goods in from China into the UK, you'd hold those goods in a bonded warehouse, and then as and when you re-exported them, the tax line is hit, so no duty applicable in the UK, and then you'd only pay the duty once into the EU. So obviously at the moment you may be suffering a double duty hit because you're bringing the goods into free circulation in the UK, and then you're bringing the goods free circulation into the EU. So 2 duty charges. Is there any import relief, duty relief for our EU customers for pass-through parts that have been imported from China to the UK and then sold onto the EU without any transformation? So again, that's the same question with the same answer. There is relief, but it's available via the special procedure of a customs warehouse, which you have to apply for to HMRC. Another question from Emily. We currently have a customer in South Korea asking for a customs authorization number. This is for an item we manufacture in the UK. I see applying for a status is quite time consuming and they need information regarding each component. So basically, this, I would have thought this relates to, I'd need further information, but it would appear to relate to providing confirmation of UK origin. It might be that customs authorization number. It's not quite clear what they're asking, but I can certainly help Emily if you can provide some further information on that.
Okay, I think you're getting the questions quicker than they're coming on my screen, James. So can you see any more questions?
I think I've covered them all.
Yeah.
Just have a quick look. No, I think that's everything. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I think we covered quite a few topics there, and as James has said, he's kindly agreed to take some questions offline if you want to follow up on anything. Well, huge thank you to James for getting through his presentation with lots and lots of facts and figures, and giving us an insight into just how much scope there is for looking at your classifications. As I say, the slides and the presentations and the recording will be up on the CEA website hopefully by tomorrow. The next Power Hour is the 26th of May, and we've got a repeat performance by Chris Slight, who's Managing Director of Off-Highway Research, that many of you will be familiar with, the leading market research company in our sector. And Chris is going to look at the overview of global construction equipment markets with their updated figures, what the effects of COVID have been on demand last year and where we're looking at in the future. So very soon we'll be sending you out an invitation and a registration link to join that Power Hour. And that's it. I think we've finished just about on time. So have a good day, enjoy the sunshine, and see you all again in a month. For any CEA members on the call, don't forget we've got our AGM and some excellent speakers on a briefing on the 29th of April. So if you haven't already signed up for that, do so now. Thanks very much and goodbye.